What's good, y'all? It's your man Sight, and thanks for tuning in today. I wanted to do something a little different, start a new series talking about some of the most influential producers on my career and kind of breaking down the ways that I studied their techniques and getting into the details of what separates them from other producers. This particular one is the most influential producer for me personally, and that's DJ Premier. So this is for all the guys who've been asking for tips as far as boom bap, how to increase your boom bap skills. This is one of the boom bap gods, and we're gonna break down this technique by recreating one of my favorite beats from him, Boom, by Royce the 5'9". So let's get into it. Let's get busy. All right, welcome back, y'all. Once again, I go by the name of Sight, and I make videos about creating dope beats using the MPC, as well as other tools for producers and content creators. So if you like this video, make sure you smash that like button down below. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you're really a real one, you'll go ahead and hit that bell notification while you're at it. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the sample that Premier used for this beat. I'm gonna bring up my screen here so you can see it. All right, and the sample is by Mark Hannibal, and the song's called Forever Is a Long, Long Time. All right, and I just downloaded this into the MPC. Let's go ahead and look at the sample. All right, and I basically chopped it up, so. Real simple. I just took a short clip of it and I just chopped it up into quarter notes. Pretty much standard procedure as far as boom bap goes. But I like the way that Premier flipped it. He actually turned it into a pattern. It sounded like this. Then I hit shift, convert, and I turned it into a new drum program using slices. So I went ahead and exported that to a program. And the next thing is drum selection. Now, this is the area in production you really can't skimp on. And honestly, it's something you can't really teach. The only way you can really get your skills up as far as drum selection is by really training your ears, listening to some of your favorite producers, and kind of finding what's in common with the drums, right? So while, you can kind of find drum kits that are curated for you, there's no replacement for learning to hear drum sounds, kind of pick apart the characteristics, right? So if we're talking about Premier here, he used really punchy kicks that had a punchy top end, but they had a lot of beef in the bottom end. But they tended to have a beefy bottom end, and sometimes he didn't even use bass lines. He just used those kicks because they bump so hard, right? So this particular beat, it wasn't exactly the type of layered kick that he used in a lot of his beats. So I'll go ahead and show you the kick that I found to emulate it. And I went through and I found a whole bunch of kicks that were kind of similar to his, but this is the one that was closest to the boom beat. All right, and next was a snare. So he tend to have, when you talk about boom bap, Premier snares literally were like bap, boom, boom, bap. When people call 90s hip hop boom bap, they really have guys like Premier in mind because, he's kind of the epitome of those sounds when it comes to drum selection. He would use closed hi-hats most of the time. Sometimes you hear him with an open hi-hat, but with his closed hats, they were actually longer than the typical one, right? Like they're not like short little tinks like an 808, like t-t-t. They're more like tss. So he kind of had like a middle range to him. Something like that, right? And it's also good to kind of dig through your drum collection and kind of compare it, so you can play the original beat and then kind of dig through your drum kit and find ones that are similar, right? So that's pretty much what I did. All right, and next thing is the tempo. Now, at this time in Premier's career, he was starting to get some radio play. He was never really kind of big on the radio, and a lot of the stuff that he got placed on the radio was because of the tempo. But this particular one was in the mid-90s, so usually between like 92 to maybe like 98 was kind of like Premier's red zone. That's when he was doing kind of his up-tempo for him. So once I exported the chops, it's down here, Forever's a Long Time. You'll see it in the programs here. So I went ahead and assigned that to track 5, hit record, play start, and punched it in. Pretty simple, right? So a lot of his loops were 2-bar loops, and sometimes he would switch it up on like the 8th bar. He would throw in like a variation. And this one, he did it with sound effects, but we'll get into that later. So we got our basic loop, and then it's time to add the drums. Now, what's cool about Premier's drums is he did use quantize, contrary to popular belief. He said he did use it sometimes if you look at certain articles. And what I think is cool about these new MPCs, they really allow us to kind of dial in how much quantize we want, right? So Premier tended to use eighth note hi-hats. All right, so let's go to our Q link over here, and we're gonna go to the bank B, and we're gonna turn on our time correct. We're gonna turn this to 1/8, okay? And we're gonna turn our swing to about 53, and our time correct strength, I'm gonna be using 80 throughout this whole beat. And what that's gonna let us do is basically give us quantize, but without it being too stiff. It gives us a little bit of human feel to it, lets the drums be a little looser, almost like exactly how you played them, but it will correct major differences in the timing if you're off, all right? And we're gonna go ahead and lay down our hi-hat track. And another thing he liked to do with his hi-hats is he wouldn't just use one level. In order to get like a really cool bop to the beat, he would use the 16 levels, all right? And turn it on velocity. And instead of just, we're gonna hit it like, all right, so let's go ahead and lay that down. All right, and one other little trick that a lot of people don't know about. All right, and we'll go into our piano grid here, tap the hi-hat. All right, turn our time correct off. And now we're gonna go over to nudge, and we're gonna bring this over just about 3 or 4 off the grid. All right, and that's just gonna give us a little more swing on those hi-hats. I still do that to this day with all kinds of beats, including trap beats. So this is just a classic technique of kind of giving the drums a little more of a human feel. All right, so we got our hi-hats laid down. Snares, kept it really simple typically during this era. You know, you're gonna follow the sample, but this particular one, just a really simple snare pattern. And let's go ahead and lay that down. Cool. All right, next to the kick, and the kick is where Premier got really funky, right? So we'll turn our time correct on. All right, and we'll turn our time correct to 16th notes this time. And the swing is gonna be way different on the kicks. What was interesting about Premier's beats is that he would go crazy with the swing on his kicks. Sometimes they would be almost triplets, and sometimes you can even hear 30-second triplets on some of Premier's beats. But this is a 16th, almost a triplet, not quite, but it was just so swingy. It was right on the edge, all right? And what I like about this is we can kind of dial up the swing to 70. It's not quite a triplet, which 75 would be, but it's real close to it. And it's gonna give us a cool little swing on it. So let's go ahead and lay that down. And this is what the pattern sounded like on that beat. Oh, and one more thing, he did put the kick on 16 levels. So let's go ahead and hit that, 16 levels, turn it on velocity. And then basically, he would use a lower velocity, sometimes called a ghost kick, and it comes right before the kick that lands on the 1. So you would kind of just, and sometimes you can kind of get carried away with it. What's cool about Premier is he did it sparsely, and he used it just to kind of emphasize certain points in the beat. So if you listen to the pattern of the drum, it's really 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. But the ghost kicks kind of just lead into it. So they're meant to kind of be felt more than heard. All right, so let's go ahead and lay it down. All right, so let's look at the piano roll so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. All right, so if you look, you can see, you know, the kicks are really close together, and those yellow ones are the ghost kicks. So they're really low on velocity. Let's go ahead and hit the velocity. You can see, and you can do this manually too, you know, if you want to just go in there and do it after the fact. But I like to use the 16 levels. So came out pretty good. All right, so we got the kick and snare down. Now let's go ahead and get to what is a really basic bass line on this beat. And it's basic because it's just filtered. And that's a technique in the 90s that was huge, filtering bass lines. A lot of guys didn't have the musical talent to go in there and play bass lines. And it became just a dope technique to just take the bass line from the sample, filter it out, put it on another channel. So it's really easy to do with the modern MPCs. Let's go ahead and do it real quick. All right, so we're gonna hit this pencil icon up here on the track, and we're gonna go to copy track, and then we're gonna copy it to track 8. I already have it copied, but I just went ahead and named it bass, and it's in there now. All right, so let's go to track 8. We have it copied, and what we're also gonna do is go down to the pencil down here in the program area. All right, and we're gonna copy the program as well. So hit duplicate. All right, and it's gonna give us another, the same program, but it's gonna give us a duplicate of it. But the difference is on this one is we're actually gonna go, there's a couple ways to do it. You can go into your program, go to filter, and then change this filter to MPC here. All right, so it's typically, it's either off or it's on low 1. I like to change it to MPC, which is a low pass filter, and it kind of gives it like the vintage MPC feel. So I brought that down to 33, and I'm not gonna leave it there. That does help. I'll solo it out so you can hear it. All right, so the original is here. We brought it down to 33. All right, and what I also did is I went here to the track, all right, and I added a parametric EQ, air power EQ, all right. And basically you can see the settings I used here. It's gonna vary based on the sample, right? So each sample is a little bit different. You know, the bass frequencies are a little bit different, but typically what I'll do is, you know, I'll kind of mess around with this low here. I think I came out to about 128, something like that. And just mess with it, right? So I turned the bass up really high on this one in that 128 hertz and down area. So, and then I turned down the low mid. So I got less of the kind of harsh mid frequencies, low mid frequencies. I turned them down -7, and you can hear before and after. Here's what it's on. Just kind of beefed up that bottom end and took out, you know, kind of the ugly frequencies that might clash with the kick. So this is a good way to get your sample basses to, you know, kind of sit underneath the kick and not get in the way of the kick. All right, so that's that. So let's play them together. All right, cool. Sounds pretty good. Another element, which is pretty cool about this beat, is Premier used kind of like, it sounded like an electric piano sample, and it just kind of, it's a call and response with the main sample. So as you can hear, the loop actually doesn't play through the whole 2-bar loop. It'll cut off and leave a couple measures at the end. So what Premier would do a lot of times is kind of like a call and response, right? So he would have his main loop, and then he took this electric piano sample and made it go. And it's just kind of played back and forth between the main loop and that organ sample. And what's dope about this technique is it separated him a lot from his peers, because a lot of people were just looping whole, you know, 2-bar, 4-bar loops. He was chopping things up and then leaving space for stuff to happen between the 3 and the 4, which was really dope. So he would either do a call and response with something like this, or you would hear his kick pattern get busy between the 3 and the 4. You know, it's just one of those things that was very characteristic of his style. And it kind of teaches you not to get too caught up in making your whole loop. Sometimes you can leave a gap, have another instrument kind of play back and forth with the loop. So this is what it sounded like when we added that in. And it's not the sound exactly. It sounded like he used a real rich EP sound, just a single note, and probably mapped it to 16 levels. But I found something similar just using the electric plugin. And let me show you the screen. I just went to electric on a plugin track here. And, you know, went to the MPC plugins, chose electric. And I just chose an EP that sounded similar. All right. And I also ran it through a channel strip just to kind of make it a little louder and add a little EQ to it where, you know, I can kind of brighten up the frequency. I also put a high pass filter on it because we don't want it clashing with our bass, right? And let's play it. All right, boom. So we're almost there. Sounds good so far. Now, one thing, if you check the liner notes, he tend to work with the same engineer at D&D Studios during this time. I think his name was Eddie Sancho. You know, he had a great chemistry with this engineer. Obviously, we don't know exactly what they did in the studio, but a big technique to kind of get drums to really pop was to use compressors. So if we want these drums to really smack the way Premiere's did, we're either going to have to do New York compression, which is parallel compression, which a lot of guys did use. But honestly, I felt like on this particular beat, I wasn't scared to slap the compressor onto the drum track. So let's go ahead and do that now and take a listen to what it sounds like. I went ahead and added a compressor vintage, which is, you know, your standard MPC, vintage compressor. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. And these are the settings that I use. And I'll typically crank the ratio up for these 90s beats. Typically, you know, compressing drums and stuff, it's a matter of taste, but a lot of times I don't go over like 3 or 4. This particular one, and during this time period, a lot of guys like Trackmasters and Premiere, a lot of stuff that was getting on the radio, the kicks were very punchy with compression, and the drums really smacked, and this is how they did it. So, you know, you adjust your input level, get it to the right input level. You're kind of playing it by ear and adjusting your threshold the same way. I left the dry wet knob 100%, but you can dial it down if it's too much. But we'll do it before and after, and I'll show you what the drums sound like before the compressor and after. Y'all ready? Woo! Brings up the hi-hats, and it makes the hi-hats duck the snare. Let's turn it off. Cool. Woo. So that's major. You know, don't be afraid when you're doing boom bap, when you're doing lo-fi and these kind of 90s inspired genres, don't be afraid to slap a compressor on your drum channel and just make it hit. You know what I mean? Like, there's really no rules to this. And we don't know what those guys were doing in the studio. You know, they could be doing this exact same thing. But if you listen to the original record, Premiere's drums just slapped, and they always did. That kind of glues a lot of the drums together, but there was always, in a decent mix, there's always a little bit of reverb on the drums, at least in my opinion, when it comes to 90s hip hop. And the reverb just kind of gels the whole beat together. So what I did was I went to my channel mixer, all right, hit my returns over here. I went to my channel mixer, hit the returns, and on return 1, I selected air reverb. All right, and these are the settings that I used. I tend to use this vintage preset to start off, and then I'll kind of tweak it from there. So I went with about 2 seconds. Again, I was listening to the original record, kind of trying to get a feel for, you know, the timing on the reverb and stuff like that. It's very subtle. He never got too carried away with reverb because he wanted the drums to really smack. And if you use too much reverb on drums, you're going to muddy them up and they won't have that clarity. But this sounds pretty good. We went ahead and, put 2 seconds of reverb time, mix at 100%. All right, so what we'll do next is we'll go to the pad mixer, choose our snare. All right, and it's normally on level. We can choose our level here. And I did a little bit of a mix and hit the send button, and that's going to take us to our effects send. All right. Now, send, you can see the little white square underneath send. That means that's our first, effect send, the return that we just set up. All right. So let's go ahead and crank this up probably to about 30. $28.5 sounds cool to me. All right. We'll do the same thing to our hi-hat. Maybe about 30. 30 is good. And even the kick, we'll put a little bit on there. It's subtle. Nothing you're really going to hear. All right, so let's hear that back. Yeah, buddy, that's thumping. All right, so that's about it. I'm not a DJ. I don't really know how to scratch, but scratches were a big part of his records, especially the hooks, as you know, and the sound effects. And that's something, you know, with hip hop beats in general, don't be afraid to throw sound effects in there. This particular one, I don't know if it happened before or after, but I get the feeling that Premier made the beat with this click, click, clink, 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 tick-tock sound in the beginning and throughout the beat in different parts. And Royce probably fell in love with it and thought about a time bomb ticking down. That's what I'm envisioning. I don't know the story of the song, but I know Premier liked to use sound effects. So don't be afraid to add sound effects into your beats, kind of give them, a little character and tell a story, and maybe inspire the lyricist or the artist that gets on your beats to, maybe give them some inspiration for some direction in the song. So don't be afraid to experiment. Premier did it all the time. Just a lot of these different concepts with this beat, the back and forth, the swing, learning those things from studying his beats really made me a better producer, really just added to my repertoire. So that'll do it for this one. Hope you guys liked it, and let me know if you want to see some more of these. There's other producers that I've studied I'd be happy to cover, and maybe, kind of make this a regular thing going forward. But by duplicating things, you can kind of learn the techniques on your machine and kind of figure out how they did things. So don't be afraid to recreate beats either, and just kind of work on your skills that way. So I appreciate y'all. Once again, if y'all are into any of the merch that I'm rocking, it's all on my site, iamsight.com. I appreciate all the support throughout 2020. I hope 2021 is a better situation for all of us, but I'm looking forward to bringing you guys more content, and make sure you drop those comments. Let me know what's good. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. All right, peace.